Gopi Jana Balaga Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Parivajacharya Soter up to his divine grace. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki. Anandakoti Vaishnava Ki. Ramacharya Haridas Thakur Ki. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Pranisi Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Shamakum Radhakum Giri Govardhan Ki Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Ganga Mai Ki Muna Mai Ki Bhakti Devi Ki Tulsi Devi Ki Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Gangtaraj Shrimad Bhagavatam Ki Samaveda Bhakta Vrindi Ki Nitai Gaur Pramanandi all glory to some devotees. All glory to some devotees. All glory to some devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and all glory to Shri. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Narayanam Namaskritya Naram. Oh, sorry. Ram Chaiva Narottamam. Devam Saraswatam Vyasam. Todayam Udirayat. Nastapareshu Bhadreshu. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Bhagavati Uttamashloke. Bhaktir Bhakti Nashki. For said the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest. One should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and to Srila Vyasadeva, the author. By regular attendance of classes on the Bhagavatam, and by rendering service unto the pure devotees, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed. In loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as a irrevocable fact. So today we're going to be discussing Canto 4, Chapter 22, Text 58, and the chapter is titled Prithvi Maharaj's meeting with the four Kumaras. Actually, we're kind of towards the end of the meeting now, and these verses that we're discussing are talking about Prithvi Maharaj's qualities. So in these next few verses, we're going to be discussing a lot about the qualities of pure devotees and how they behave, which is important for us because as we're practicing Krishna consciousness, it helps us remember what qualities we should be trying to cultivate or consciously trying to bring out within ourselves. Of course, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, that all living entities are as fragmental part and parcels, but we're struggling very hard with the six senses, including the mind. So by nature, we have actually all the qualities of a pure devotee because originally we were all pure devotees of Krishna. But these qualities have been covered over. So through this process of hearing about the qualities of Prithvi Maharaj, and consciously trying to practice them, we can revive this within ourselves. So today, text 58 is a short text and short purport. So we should have more time for discussion today, hopefully. unless I go off on a rant. Alright. Varshati sma yata kamam Arjanya eva tarpayan Samudra eva durbodhya Satvina jalaradiva Varshati sma yata kamam Arjanya eva tarpayan Samudra eva durbodhya Satvina jalaradiva Varshati sma yata kamam Arjanya eva tarpayan Samudra eva durbodhya Satvina jalaradiva Please chant.
Varsati sma yatha kamam Parjanya iva tarpayam Samudra iva durbodha Satvena chalaradiva Varsati sma yatha kamam Varshati sma yatha kamam Arjanya iva tarpayam Samudra iva durbodha Satvena chalaradiva
Varshati sma yatha kamam
Varshati sma yatha kamam
Arjanya eva tarpayam
Arjanya iva tarpayam
Samudra eva durbodha
Samudra iva durbodha
Satvena chalaradiva
Satvena chalaradiva
Alright. Word for word. Varshati,
Varshati
pouring.
or
Sma,
sma
used to.
used to
Yata kamam,
yatha kamam
as much as one can desire.
as much as one can have.
Parjanya,
Parjanya
water.
water.
Iva,
Iva
like.
like
Tarpayan,
tarpayam
pleasing.
pleasing.
Samadruya,
Samudra
the sea.
sea.
Iva,
Iva
likened.
like it.
Durbodha,
Durbodha
not understandable.
not understandable.
Satvina,
Satvena
by existential position.
by existential.
Achala,
Achala
the hills. Rat Iva, like the king of. Translation. Just as rainfall satisfies everyone's desires, Maharaj Prithu used to satisfy everyone. He was like the sea in that no one could understand his depths. And he was like Meru, the king of hills, in the fixity of his purpose. Please repeat. Just as rainfall satisfies everyone's desires,
Just as rainfall satisfies everyone's desires.
Maharaj Prithu used to satisfy everyone.
Maharaj used to satisfy everyone.
He was just like the sea,
He was just like the sea,
in that no one could understand his depths.
and that no one can understand his depth.
And he was like Meru,
And he was like Meru,
the king of hills,
king of hills,
in the fixity of his purpose.
and the sea of his purpose.
Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Maharaj Prithu used to distribute his mercy to suffering humanity, and it was like rainfall after excessive heat. The ocean is wide and expansive, and it is very difficult to measure its length and breadth. Similarly, Maharaj Prithu was so deep and grave that no one could fathom his purpose. The hill known as Meru is fixed in the universe as a universal pivot, and no one can move it an inch from its position. Similarly, no one could ever dissuade Maharaj Prithu when he was determined. Om Disha Kananjana Shalakaya Chakshuru Miltamina Tasmai Shri Gurve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Vishram Savitam Yana Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dinati Swaparantikam Bandiham Shiguro Shiyuta Parakamalam Shiguro and Vaishnavam Shah Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Prajana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitam Shah Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagapate Govesha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Kriya Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vevacha Patisanam Bhavnebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, Prabhupada says here that just as rainfall satisfies everyone's desires, Maharaj Prithu used to satisfy everyone. So in one purport, Srila Prabhupada mentions that during the reign of Prithu Maharaj, there was ample rainfall. When there are pious rulers on the earth, because they are engaging in sacrifice for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the earth gives amply, because everything is being used in the service of the Lord. So Prabhupada says in this purport that this rainfall in itself, it actually satisfies everyone's desires. Well, for one, human bodies need water, right? Another thing is the rainfall comes and it gives us vegetables. And even at certain times, Prabhupada even linked rainfall to the production of gems, things like this in the earth. Also, when the earth is watered, the cows have grass, and the cows eat the grass, and therefore they produce milk, and so many other products are made. And herbs grow as well. So, by this rain, Prabhupada was saying, human beings have all their necessities. So therefore, they don't need artificial things. In other words, we have so many artificial things to try to supply what we need in this world. Now I'm hearing, or one devotee when I was in Mayapur told me, in China, people buy canned air because it is so polluted there that they have difficulty breathing, so they actually get canned air. And of course, I've also heard that this was before COVID. So I heard during COVID, because not so many people were driving, the pollution, smog and stuff started to clear up. But yeah, because we have produced all these artificial things that human beings don't need for surviving. The actual natural resources that we do need, like air, clean water, and things like that, we don't have access to. I know just traveling in different Latin American countries, you see that a lot of people don't drink the water there. And even now in the United States, many people don't drink the tap water. When I was a child, I used to drink the tap water without really any concern. But now even here, people don't do this. So, but when the point is, when you have a pious ruler, things are as they should be. So therefore, the rainfall, it supplies everything. So Maharaj Prithu, he was satisfying everyone's desires. And what does this mean? Maharaj Prithu was satisfying everyone's desires, as we discussed previously, because he was making sure everyone was engaged in their occupation. But most importantly, he was giving everyone the opportunity to engage in devotional service, giving them the purpose of life. And this is why so many people are confused nowadays and bewildered. Because many people wonder, what is the purpose of life? Why am I here? What is the point of these things? Everybody has these questions at some point in time. What is the meaning of life? Even if you look at the most 100 questions asked on Google, on that list is what is the meaning of life? So people are even asking Google Maharaj, as we call it, what is the meaning of life? But this is the job of the king, to give people this meaning. So therefore, we see this conversation has been going on between Prithu Maharaj and the four Kumaras. And the citizens, they're hearing directly, okay, what is the purpose of life? What am I supposed to be doing? How do I engage in service to Krishna? If I'm part and parcel of Krishna, I'm meant to serve him. Okay, how should this be done? And so therefore, the king, not only is everybody getting everything they need for the maintenance of their body and for the maintenance of their health through this ample rainfall, but also because, they have healthy body, healthy mind, then one can focus on devotional service. So he's also giving them devotional service, helping them revive their loving relationship to Krishna. So in this purport, Prabhupada talks about a few qualities of Prithu Maharaj. And 3 things are brought up today. And in the future, we're going to hear more. But one of the things that is mentioned is that it said the ocean, Maharaj Prithu is like the ocean. The ocean is wide and expansive, and it is very difficult to measure its length and breadth. Similarly, Prithu Maharaj was so grave that no one could fathom his purposes. So Prithu Maharaj was very deep. He compares this to the ocean. So, the deepest part of the ocean is the Mariana Trench. And so when I was studying oceanography, this was back maybe 10 years ago, at this time, not even human beings had really explored the bottom of this trench. Now in 2020, they went, but still they haven't explored it vastly. So Prithu Maharaj was deeper than that. He was grave. So what does this gravity mean? Well, Prabhupada gives several definitions of gravity in his books, but one of these definitions is that for the pure devotee, they are very grave. It means one cannot understand their mind or their mood. You don't necessarily know what they're thinking or what their purpose is. So examples of this are given from Srila Prabhupada's own life. Once when Srila Prabhupada was preaching at 26 Second Avenue, they decided to have, feast for all the guests. I think this was at the beginning of the Sunday Love Feast. So Achyutananda Prabhu, he is cooking. And he said Prabhupada came in there once. And Prabhupada asked him to open the pantry. Let's see what we have. And Prabhupada has very serious expression on his face. He doesn't know why Prabhupada's asking him to do this. So he opens the pantry. And he's showing Prabhupada, okay, Prabhupada, here we have potatoes about 100 pounds. We have rice about 100 pounds. Here we have the sugar. We have brown rice for healthy people, whatnot. Prabhupada's just looking, and he's not sure why Prabhupada wants to see that. And then later that night at the lecture, Prabhupada is preaching, and he's telling the guest, here we are simply chanting Hare Krishna. And we have 100 pounds of potato, 100 pounds of rice, 100 pounds of sugar. What do you have 100 pounds of, and you are working all day? Therefore, you come join us. So you didn't understand at the time that Prabhupada was looking, and then he was using this as an example for his evening lecture. Once there was a devotee that his service was to watch Prabhupada's house. And he had the night watch. They were watching after Prabhupada, making sure he had what he needed and protecting him and whatnot. And so he said that his shift was from 9 p.m. to 4 a.m. And at some point during his shift, he notices around 1 o'clock in the morning, Prabhupada's light comes on. And he sees Prabhupada starting his translating. And so he's watching Prabhupada translate. And then after a few minutes, it starts to rain. So the devotee goes around and he goes into this garage area. And at the time, he didn't understand that Prabhupada would be able to come around to that area from where he was at the house. And so he's getting out of the rain and he's standing there and he turns around and he sees Prabhupada. And Prabhupada's looking right at him, but Prabhupada doesn't say anything. He can't tell what Prabhupada's thinking. He's not sure what the mood is. And Prabhupada's just standing there. And eventually the devotee pays his obeisances. And he stands up and he looks at Srila Prabhupada and he says, Srila Prabhupada, how may I serve you? And Prabhupada tells him, you can go where I cannot go. And he said at this point, Prabhupada had just traveled everywhere. He'd been to Japan, Chicago, all these places. So he said, Prabhupada, where is it that I can go that you cannot go? So he was confused. And Prabhupada said, you can go to the future. And how you deal with the people there is that you tell them that Krishna loves them. So often there's several pastimes how Prabhupada could be like this. People couldn't understand his sometimes what he was thinking, his mood of serving his spiritual master. Similarly, after 22nd Avenue was established, many of the devotees said, they use this as an example of Prabhupada's gravity. They were thinking, okay, Krishna consciousness, ISKCON has now started here in this place in New York, and here it will stay, and Prabhupada will stay here with us for a long time. They weren't thinking of a worldwide movement. But then later, Prabhupada, somebody came and said, Prabhupada, you should come out to the West Coast. And so Prabhupada went out to the West Coast. He was detached in this way. He was determined to please the spiritual master. And so they said, in this way, we were thinking Prabhupada's purpose was to stay here, but really he wanted to spread this all around the world. So this is how a devotee is. They're very serious about Krishna consciousness, the pure devotee, and they are also very grave. So in this way, one shouldn't try to speculate on the mind of the pure devotee. So Srila Prabhupada has given us, he's established this ISKCON in the Western world. He's given us Krishna consciousness, and he's given us a process. And sometimes, people might try to speculate, why did Prabhupada do this, or why did Prabhupada do that? But Prabhupada knew what he was doing very expertly, and it worked. And so in this way, how do we develop this gravity in Krishna consciousness, this seriousness also, and how do we develop this like the pure devotee has it? Well, one way is that by always connecting everything to Krishna consciousness, we can understand how this material world is working. And speaking Krishna Katha. And even sometimes we see things that don't seem directly related to Krishna, but still we can connect it to Krishna, and we can see, we can remember the nature of this material world. And that really ultimately, it's not a place for our enjoyment, but it's actually a school to help us learn. I think I had told some of you that when I was home visiting my family, we were watching this movie, and basically it was like one of these end of the world type scenarios where some country had hacked into the communication systems and satellites of the United States and shut everything down. So nobody's GPS was working, nobody's cell phones was working, there was no TV, no radio, and airplanes started falling out of the sky, cars started crashing because everything is now electronic, and nobody could figure out what was going on. It was just like in one day, everything was complete chaos. And I remember looking at that, and I remember thinking, we think that we're so comfortable here. A lot of people will come to the United States of America specifically because they want to have a comfortable life. Even my professor, when I was in college, she was from Colombia, and she had been traveled around. She said, if you want a luxurious, comfortable material life, America is definitely your place for comforts. She said the portion size of food that you guys have, the standard of living you guys have. And so she was going on and on. But then I was watching this, and I was seeing just how easy it was to just disable everything. And it goes back to what I was saying before. We created all these artificial necessities, but just one glitch in the system and complete chaos can arise. We can't even do the Govinda's restaurant when our Square app doesn't work. It's chaos. I'm sure some of you have been working like that, and the square out doesn't work, and we can't take orders. So this is what I'm saying. You can look at this, you can connect it all to Krishna, you can see this temporary situation, this material world. That all it takes is one thing. And this artificial civilization that we've created for ourselves crashes. Which is why, and then it made me go back and then it made me remember why Prabhupada wanted us to establish simple living and high thinking, to not be so dependent on these things. So that when we don't have them, we're still able to be Krishna conscious, we're still able to function. So in this way, we can develop this grave mood by hearing Krishna Katha and also seeing situations and connecting them back to Krishna. This helps a lot. And having this grave mood, it saves us from so many also embarrassing situations. Keeps you from putting your foot in your mouth and things like this. So you can see that a devotee, one of the qualities of a devotee is that they're very silent. But silence doesn't mean that they don't speak. But when they have something to say about Krishna, they can speak, or something that they can relate to Krishna, they can speak. And sometimes, it might be necessary, we have to say, what's going on in our lives. Revealing one's mind in confidence is one of the 6 loving exchanges of devotees. And also, so maybe we might talk about what's going on, in this situation, that situation, very practical. But at the same time, a devotee is not necessarily just talking about what happened on this episode of that show yesterday with no really purpose involved in it. And one thing I kind of see with the devotees here is that, even though sometimes we have all sorts of conversations, eventually one of us always connects it back to Krishna, and then, it makes everything very nice. So that's one of the nice things about being with devotees, is that even if something kind of goes off into prajapas, eventually Krishna always comes back into the conversation. So this helps us develop gravity. Another point that's mentioned in this purport is Prithu Maharaj's determination. He's described as being like Mount Meru, fixed in his position, and no one can move, not even an inch. So Prithu Maharaj being this leader, being very fixed in his Krishna consciousness, he wasn't, he wasn't out there trying to get campaign votes, trying to, I'm going to make promises to certain people in order to get their votes, but say this or say that. But no, he was very fixed in his purpose and in his Krishna consciousness. And he wouldn't change, pure devotees, they don't change their position. Now you see many politicians, they might accept bribes, or the Congress, whenever they vote on something, they accept something from lobbyists. But Maharaj Prithu, he understood the purpose, he understood the big picture of things and where he was going. And in that way, he was able to do his duty for Krishna. That's one thing that helps us in Krishna consciousness in doing our duty. Because sometimes we don't want to do it. It's hard to be determined. But if we realize why we're doing it, then that can help us with our determination. So just reading about Prabhupada, you can see that when Prabhupada was trying to establish Krishna consciousness, it wasn't always easy for him. And even I've heard, and I've been revisiting the Prabhupada memories over this past week, and one devotee, he was saying that sometimes we would take it for granted that Srila Prabhupada, we thought, oh, he's this transcendental, personality. But actually, there were some things that were difficult for him. Yes, he was transcendental. But that doesn't mean that he didn't experience the difficulties in trying to establish Krishna consciousness. It wasn't all easy. And he went through so many difficulties, even just trying to get to the United States of America. Going to another country, even when you're young, is a big culture shock. And when you're not familiar with all the customs of the people. But what to speak of going to another country to give Krishna consciousness to a place where nobody has ever heard of it before. So I come from a portion of the United States where hardly anyone has ever heard of Bhagavad Gita. Anyone has ever heard of Krishna. I never heard of that for the first 20 years of my life. I never even thought about that. But at the time that Prabhupada came, there might have been Bhagavad Gita in the country. Some people had heard of Bhagavad Gita, but no one had Bhagavad Gita as it is. No one had Bhagavad Gita given from a pure devotee of the Lord. So Srila Prabhupada, he said, I was always trying to please my spiritual master, even when it was difficult. We see that there's this story, Prabhupada, when he came here, he was staying with a roommate that was on LSD. So you can think about the environment which Prabhupada came from. He wasn't accustomed to people that were on these types of drugs. And it's described that he used to go to the shipping yard every day to see when the next boat was going back to India. That's how difficult it was. And then also, when he was doing some programs in Butler, Pennsylvania, he gave some talks there. It's described that people, when they would come to hear him, they were smoking. Because back in these days, people used to smoke everywhere. They would just light up in buildings. And eventually some of them realized he's a saintly person. Maybe we shouldn't do this in front of him. And they would apologize. Prabhupada would say, don't think anything about it. Very accustomed to these things here. He had never eaten meat before in his life, but yet he had to put his vegetables that he used for cooking in a refrigerator that had meat in it. All these things are not easy. And even when he was trying to get things going, and he had some people coming to 26 2nd Avenue and they were staying, then Jadharani came. And then there was a little bit of a situation because there wasn't a place for her to stay. Because the men, they were staying 26 2nd Avenue. So at one point, Prabhupada even told her, because Prabhupada had a room, he said, since I know you and you know me, you could stay with me. But people would talk. But still, Prabhupada considered that because he wanted to give her some shelter. He's a sannyasi. People would criticize it. Sannyasis aren't supposed to associate with women. They're not even supposed to cross the ocean. He married his disciples. Sannyasis weren't supposed to take part in weddings and things like that. But Prabhupada did all this, even at the point of criticism, because he really wanted to please his spiritual master and he really wanted to see everyone become Krishna conscious. It's so sweet what Prabhupada did. A lot of people, if they have a situation where somebody will talk about their reputation, they won't do something. I don't want my reputation ruined. But yet his godbrothers, they were criticizing him for so many things. But still, Prabhupada was doing everything he could to try to please his spiritual master. And even somebody brought up this point to me that I never actually thought about. Prabhupada, he was trying to please his spiritual master by going to the West, but at the same time, he was getting criticism from his godbrothers. And normally, we say in Krishna consciousness, we have Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. But imagine trying to fulfill an order of your spiritual master, but yet certain sadhus are criticizing you for it. It's a difficult situation, when certain devotees don't like what you're doing. One of the things that Prabhupada also had to deal with was that, and somebody had brought this up to me too when we were discussing Prabhupada, is that when Prabhupada came here to this culture, he had never seen before, because coming from India, and coming from the culture that he came from, people, whatever they said they were going to do, they did. So when he came here to the U.S. and he initiated disciples, and some of them were falling down, he said it's actually quite shocking for Prabhupada in the very beginning, because he could see how far, how affected people were by Kali Yuga. Because he came from this place, where if you said, I vow to do this, you're going to do it. So he also had to tolerate these things. People making vows, people not keeping them. I think actually, the very first initiations, some of the devotees were thinking, yeah, I'll do it, just because everybody else is doing it. Later Prabhupada got higher standard. But in the beginning, just to give the mercy, he was so determined just to give people Krishna consciousness that, he was willing to do all these things. He made certain adjustments. You can see in this culture, that women aren't protected first by their father, and then by their husband, and then by their son. So therefore, he had established brahmacharya ashram. Prabhupada made so many types of he did so many things just for the purpose of giving people in the world Krishna consciousness. And where would we be if Prabhupada hadn't come? But Prabhupada was determined. He had his mind fixed on the goal. And even then we could see that just by studying what Prabhupada did, not everything he had planned worked out all the time exactly how he was originally thinking. But still, his purpose was to serve Krishna. Okay, this didn't happen the way I wanted to happen. Okay, kind of like what's next? So many of us, when things don't go according to our way, we get discouraged. We think, oh, Krishna, what? Krishna has neglected me. Krishna has forsaken me. This didn't work out. But Prabhupada, he kept going. And he knew Krishna had some plan. And he knew that Lord Chaitanya wanted this movement spread all over the world. So this was Srila Prabhupada's determination. And then even after establishing everything in America, then he was going to places like Nairobi. He went back to India. He was going all over the world, just trying to give people Krishna consciousness. He translated 80 volumes of literature, which still to me is like unfathomable. Even if Prabhupada had just did the first 3 volumes of Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, that might have been considered a great accomplishment. But no, Prabhupada did so much more than that. He never stopped. So he had this fixed determination. Even when his health was not so good, he would still remain fixed in preaching. And there's stories of how when Prabhupada sometimes felt sick, he didn't feel so well, people would come in to see him. Prabhupada would say, let them in. And he would start talking to them, Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada, they said he would go on a morning walk every day. And even when he was in a car accident and he was hurt, he was fixed. He got up and he still went and walked. Even when the weather was bad outside, it's described in a hotel, he walked around the corridor just to keep his regulation. So Prabhupada was so fixed and Prabhupada was determined. And this is how the devotee is. They're very determined to try to please Krishna and to try to please their spiritual master. So we should also develop this determination. Even, like as a conditioned soul, there might be so many difficulties. And we might have maybe some weakness of character. We might have some attachments because of our previous samskaras. But it said, we just have to stay alive in Krishna consciousness somehow. One advice that a devotee gave me was Prabhupada disciple. And he had been a brahmacharya for several years. And then after Prabhupada left, and a bunch of things started happening in the movement, and it was chaotic. He loved Krishna consciousness. He loved the association of devotees. But he said, I never gave up my determination to chant 16 rounds, and I never gave up my determination to hear from Prabhupada, even though he had a difficulty following the 4 regulative principles. And he did that for a few years, and eventually Krishna brought him back in. Yeah, so he was advising me. He said, no matter what, just stay in Krishna consciousness somehow. Keep going. And we might have different reactions. We have to suffer in different things. But as Srimad Bhagavatam says, this verse, if we tolerate the reactions of our past activities and we're endeavoring to please Krishna, we're endeavoring to have the mercy of the Lord, you become eligible for liberation. There might be so many difficulties. It's not that we become a pure devotee and everything is easy. Haridas Thakur, he had difficulties. Ramachandra Khan tried to ruin his reputation. So there might be difficulties, there might be fall downs. We can see also in the life of Haridas, and not Haridas Thakur, but Bilbamangala Thakur, when he went to see a prostitute. Well, actually, it's described that his father passed away. And he had the brahmanas chant the mantras faster because he was thinking of going to see this prostitute. And he went in bad weather. He went across a river. We know all this story of how he held onto a dead body, and then to climb up her place, he grabbed onto a snake and all these things. And she said, what are you doing here? If you had this determination to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you would be a pure devotee. Of course, it's described further in Shastra that this prostitute was actually one of his gurus in a previous life. So he stayed with her that night, and she spoke with him, Krishna consciousness. And then later he goes to Vrindavan, but even on the way to Vrindavan, he stops somewhere, and what happens? He sees the wife of this person, and then he wants the wife, you know. So even after taking up Krishna consciousness, you know, we might have some difficulties due to our past situations, but one has to keep going, and there might be some reaction, but still, if we stay alive, determined to serve Krishna, we'll get Krishna's mercy. One of the popular stories in Christianity, you know, that they give to illustrate this point about being determined and one's path with God. When I was little, they used to tell the story of King David and how after he became king, he was walking on the rooftops, and he saw this lady bathing, and he desired her. So he called her to him, and because she was king, he seduced her. But the problem was she was married, and she got pregnant from this. So then he tries to cover it up. Her husband's off fighting in war. And he calls her husband back and sends her husband home with her. And he's hoping something will happen between them so that the child that she's carrying, she can pass off as her husband. But her husband's so distracted because his army is fighting that he sleeps in another place. He doesn't sleep in the room with his wife. And this goes on for several nights. So the king realizes, okay, I can't cover up my sin. You know, sometimes when we do something bad, we want to try to cover it up. Yeah? And so therefore, he gets even deeper, you know, and then he decides, okay, I'm going to get rid of this guy. So he sends him to the front lines of the war and then tells other soldiers to fall back. So he's exposed to the enemy, and then he has him killed. And then, so he thinks, okay, now I've gotten rid of this person. He's a devotee of God, but yet he had this, you know, weakness in him. And then later, you know, the son that he had with this girl, it ended up dying. And but still, he continued in his path with God. He understood this was just some reaction. So in the same way, we might have some fall down. You know, there might be some reaction for that. But if we stay fixed in our Krishna consciousness, Krishna helps us. He holds our hand, and he'll carry us through. I've heard it happen in the life of so many devotees. Krishna doesn't let you run away. When I know a guy in Mexico, he was Prabhupada's pujari. He used to do Guru Puja 4 times a week. And then later he left, and he was working in an office. And this lady came to him, and she said, I found these Hare Krishna people. Why don't you come to the temple with me? I heard you used to do this. He said, yes, I used to do that, but I don't do that anymore. I'm not a part of them. She said, well, please, I want to go to their Sunday feast. Or I want to go to one of their programs. So will you come with me? And I can't remember which, I guess maybe she went to morning program or something. But anyway, he says, fine, I'll go. And so he goes to morning program with her. And he sees all of his old friends again. And they're like, where have you been, Prabhu? He's like, I'm kind of working now. I'm not really practicing this anymore, but it's good to see you. And Guru Puja comes. And he sees the pujari waving the chamra, Prabhupada. And immediately, as Krishna consciousness is revived in his heart because he remembers the service that he had to Srila Prabhupada. And he remembered that service, so therefore, then again, he started to take it back up. But don't go away completely like that. Somehow or other, keep going in Krishna consciousness. Have this determination to please Krishna. Have this determination to please your spiritual master. And Krishna will get rid of whatever impediments that are holding you back eventually. So, another point that we also see here is Prithu Maharaj's mercy. But also, one more point on determination. So how do we develop this determination? This determination in Krishna consciousness. Of course, we know by association, but also another thing that gives us determination is the 4 regulative principles, specifically celibacy. Celibacy helps determination in controlling the tongue. In the tongue, belly, and genitals, when all these are controlled, one can develop this determination. So it helps us get this one-pointed fixed determination that the Bhagavad Gita talks about. And lastly, for Maharaj's mercy. So he distributed his mercy to suffering humanity. So Maharaj did not discriminate. It said that the pure devotee, he sees with equal vision. The learned Brahmana, the cow, the dog eater. The dealings, the individual dealings might have to be tweaked a little bit. We're not going to embrace a tiger. But still, the pure devotee sees that within this living entity is a spirit soul, and they are ultimately part and parcel of Krishna. So we can see this in Prabhupada's behavior. Prabhupada once said that this Krishna consciousness movement is meant to help every living entity. Often we hear that the Krishna consciousness movement is meant for human beings, because we often say that animals can't take the Krishna consciousness, whatever. And this is true; they can't understand philosophy and whatnot. But ultimately, it's meant to help every living being. So Narayan, I think he actually passed away a year or so ago. He, in his Prabhupada memories, he was explaining that he was with Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was sitting at his desk. And Prabhupada looked at him and he said, we must always be thinking of our duty. And he said, do you know what my duty is? He said, do you see this ant here? There's an ant crawling on it. My duty is to think, how can I help this ant? He said, I could give the ant a little bit of prasadam, I could chant Hare Krishna to the ant, And it was a sweet pastime, because sometimes we can be like dismissive of this. But even the small, Prabhupada was demonstrating by this pastime that even the smallest little creatures, he also wanted to help become Krishna conscious. So it's very sweet, So animals you can also help. I think there was one acharya that can't remember the name, but he used to chant part of his rounds out loud so the other living entities could hear. Maybe this was Haridas Thakur, and then part silently, so everybody could benefit. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he also demonstrated this, giving his mercy to everyone. It's described that he went to South India and he gave everyone the Maha Mantra without discrimination and got them all chanting Hare Krishna. He took sannyas. One of the purposes that he took sannyas was to give his mercy to the Mayavadis. Because it's described that even at that time, a Mayavadi would pay their obeisances to a sannyasi. So by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's taking sannyas, even the Mayavadi sannyasis, they were paying their obeisances to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And yes, we know this pastime, how he all converted the Mayavadis to Krishna consciousness. He gave his mercy in that way too. So Lord Nityananda, he ordered Lord Nityananda, you stay in Bengal and you preach. You don't have to come to Jagannath Puri every year. Stay in Bengal and give Krishna consciousness to all the living entities there. Similarly, when this mercy, it also comes in the form of Lord Jagannath. Lord Jagannath, he's giving his prasadam to everyone. So when you go to Puri and Parikrama, many of the devotees told me, you feast there. Because feasting is very easy. It is not so much of an austerity. You always notice at every temple, the prasadam line will be longer than the book table line. Because this mercy is easy, and this mercy is telling me to give up all my material attachments. People aren't ready for that. They want to take prasadam. So this is kind of Prabhupada's trick in the very beginning to, get them chanting, get them taking prasadam. Regular principles come later. Yeah. So you get them attached to Krishna in this way. Lots of prasadam, chanting, and things like this. So we can see that in Jagannath Puri, Lord Jagannath's prasadam is given to everyone without discrimination. And in fact, this mercy, Lord Jagannath, he gave his mercy to one devotee through his prasadam. There was one devotee of Lord Jagannath, he couldn't go into the temple. And one time he came home and he was very tired. So he told his wife, could you make something to eat? So the wife made some preparation with rice, and then made some rice, and then some like black preparation and some red preparation. I can't remember all the names of these preparations. But anyway, it was situated on the plate in such a way that you had the white, the black, the red, so it looked like Jagannath's eyes. And so by seeing this, the devotee was thinking, I want to go see Lord Jagannath, but I haven't been to see Lord Jagannath. And he was meditating on Jagannath in this way. So when the wife brought prasadam, the prasadam looked like Lord Jagannath. He's like, oh, that is my Lord. And then he goes into ecstasy like this. So this is the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And because the Supreme Personality of Godhead is all merciful like this, therefore Krishna himself is all merciful. So Lord Jagannath also, he always has his eyes open. He never closes his eyes. You know, they're round like circle and they're big like magnifying glass because he always wants to see his devotees. He sees his devotees giving his darshan to devotees. Therefore, they get the mercy. But then not just to the devotees, to everyone. That's why he goes out on Rath Yatra. You know, so many people on the street, they see Lord Jagannath. They take that darshan of Lord Jagannath that stays with them forever. So Krishna is saying, okay, you won't come see me. Okay, I'm going out in the street and I'm coming to see you. So sometimes Krishna will come and he'll give his mercy himself, but many times also he will send, we also see he sends his pure devotees, like Prithu Maharaj, to give the mercy. So we see here in one way, Prithu Maharaj's qualities, he's all merciful. He's taking this mercy that he's gotten from being part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he's giving it to his citizens. He first instructed them, and now he's having this conversation with the four Kumars to also give them some benefits. So with that said, I think I'll conclude here. Vancha kalpa tribhisha kripa sindhave vishapati sanam bhavnibhyo vaishnavi onamon maha. Hare Krishna. Yes.
Thank you so much. I was really happy to hear you bring up the story of King David. That was always like my favorite story out of the entire Bible. And my very favorite part of that was at the end, after King David had done all these things that were, you know, self-serving and you know, just not very moral things that he did. It says in the Bible that God, even after he did all that, God said, "This is a man after my own heart." And the reason I liked that story so much was because it gave me hope, you know, that wow, I still can come to God or to Krishna with, you know, and serve him, you know, like I'm not too fallen, you know, because I didn't do nearly half the things that King David did, you know, and then the same principle, you know, I think sometimes people, they stop practicing Krishna consciousness, they go away and they think, and a lot of times they'll feel like, oh, I'm too fallen to come back. You know, I can't come back. You know, people are going to, you know, reject me, or Krishna's going to reject me. But that's not true. We know that. And, you know, like your point said, you know, to just stay alive in Krishna consciousness. You know, I think that's very, very good. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, you're reminding me of the point Prabhupada makes in Bhagavad Gita. You know, like even devotee has some fall down, if they're rightly situated, they're considered saintly. But at the same time, Prabhupada makes the point in the purport that, you know, these things, their determination is to serve Krishna. So they just have something. They're not thinking, oh, you know, like I'm Krishna conscious, but I'm going to, you know, go do this activity or whatever. Their determination is to actually get rid of their material attachments, and because of that, Krishna says that they're considered saintly because their mind is in the right place. And that also brings up the other point that this determination has to be rightly situated to serve Krishna, because Ravana was determined, you know, determined to take Sita, and Hiranyakashipu was determined. And so it's also within itself is not. Within not a quality, not a Krishna conscious quality, if it's not properly used.
Yeah.
Any other points? Our discussion on the qualities of Prithu Maharaj. All right. Well, anyway, I think it's time for breakfast, so thank you for coming. Hare Krishna, Gankara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki.
Christian preaching, I used to use the story of King David in almost every single preaching scenario I had.
Okay, coming.
Yeah,